Okay, Catherine, and everybody, it's Peter Giesman here from AJS, and welcome to another online demonstration coming to you from a jeweler's workshop somewhere in Australia. And this week we're coming to you from sunny, well, perhaps not so sunny, but sunny enough, Adelaide. And good morning to you, Catherine.
Good morning, Peter, and good morning to everybody else who's joining us today. Thank you so much, for participating and joining me for another session on riveting. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm living and working and creating on the lands of the Kaurna people, and I'd like to acknowledge their elders, past, present, and emerging, and the incredible and spiritual link that they still have to the land that I get to enjoy. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Catherine. So today, as you inferred, is about riveting rivets, we've called the presentation, and this is a follow-up to your first demonstration a little while ago. And would you just like to remind us what we covered last time and what we're going to cover today?
Well, last time we looked at the classic mushroom and square rivet. So if you guys remember, I created, and this is a side view of two pieces of metal that have been kind of sliced in half. I've drilled a hole through the middle, I've put a piece of wire in, and then I've created a mushroom shape like that, or a square shape like that. So that's what we did last time. When I'm hoping that you guys can see this on the camera, but I've got a, oops, there we go.
We've got it, yeah.
Yep. On this end over here, you can see a tiny little classic rivet. What we're going to look at today is the ones that are on the side here that hopefully you can't see very well at all, because these are flush rivets or countersunk rivets. So essentially, if you use the same material, so this material in the main part of this pendant is aluminium. So if I used aluminium wire, it would be invisible. You wouldn't be able to see the rivet. But I've actually used sterling silver in these ones, so you just get this subtle hint of a different colour coming through, but it's flush. It's completely flat. So it is a great little technique to learn, because it can, it means you don't have a raised surface. So if you want that nice clean look, this is really effective. And you can hide it completely by using the same material, or you can kind of make it a bit more obvious by using something as different. So if you can see this one in here, oh, let me go that way. Love working backwards. Yeah, you might be able to see in this piece of scrap aluminium, I've put a tiny little copper rivet. Oh yeah, can you see it better there? It looks a bit better. So yeah, that tiny little spot of copper means it can pop a little bit better. If you are looking for some amazing examples of this kind of work, Cinnamon Lee in Sydney, she's one of the artists at Courtesy of the Artist in the Strand Arcade. Her workmanship is amazing. Her riveting, the precision is stunning. So you want a good example of flush rivets? Cinnamon Lee in Sydney.
Right.
So today, oh, I've got something on my screen that has something you can see. There we go. So for today, what we're going to do is something quite similar. So move that over. I've still got my two pieces of metal, but after I drill the hole, I'm actually going to change the shape of the hole. So I've got the top, this is the top layer of metal, this is the bottom layer of metal. I've drilled the hole through, but then I use a ball burr to just take out the top and the bottom piece so that there's something there for the metal to sink into, to hold the metal in place. I then insert my wire, and I will kind of be hammering it down so it has that kind of rounded shape, but I'm trying to fill all this area here and here, here and here, so it then has something to hold the two pieces of metal together. And so once you've filled that hole, you then sand it back so that you have this nice flush, flat rivet. So yes, that, you can see that?
Yeah, that's great.
Excellent.
Well illustrated.
Excellent. So some of the tools that we will be using are, you need something to drill into. I've just got a couple of pieces of scrap metal for the purposes of this. You will need a metal block so that you can do some hammering. You need a little riveting hammer. Because we're working in small scale in jewellery, something quite small works quite well. A pair of flush cutters, so these cut wire straight. I find a pair of parallel square nose pliers or flat nose pliers quite helpful for inserting the wire. A file, so this isn't just my generic half round needle file. You need a drill bit that is the same diameter as the wire that you're going to use. So I've got some copper wire, so hopefully it'll show up better on the video for you guys. So the drill bit is the same diameter, or possibly even like a fraction of a millimetre smaller. And then a ball burr, which is slightly larger, to get that countersunk shape. If you don't know the size of all your wire and drill bits, then a pair of calipers to be able to measure things. Masking tape if you want to protect your work. And then the secret weapon, secret tool.
They're back. They're back.
They're back. a couple of pieces of playing card with little holes punched out of them. And you can probably tell from these pieces, they are very, very well used. So that's our, and one last thing, and a sanding block. So some kind of, sandpaper on something nice and flat so that your sanding will be smooth. Alrighty, shall we get into it?
Let's get into it, Katherine.
All right. So the first thing you want to do is measure your wire. So if you know what it is, great. If you don't, grab your piece of wire and measure it. So we've got, 1.1 mil here. So if I know the size of my wire, I then get my drill bit and make sure that it is going to be either the same size or ever so slightly smaller. For those of you who didn't see me do this last time, you need to measure across the point of a drill bit. So I might actually draw that for you. So with a drill bit, there's actually quite a distinct point. So you need to measure from there to there, rather than kind of from this side to that side. By going across the point, you measure the correct distance. If you go across the other way, you'll end up with a slightly smaller measurement, which won't be as accurate. So I've got a drill piece that is just a little bit smaller, and that will ensure I have a nice tight fit for my rivet. So you can, depending on how what your design is. You can tape or you can glue your two pieces together to make sure that you drill them in the exact right place. However, you might be able to, if accuracy is not the big issue, you might do something like drill one, mark your hole, drill the second one. So both of those they're options, but that would depend on your design and what you're trying to achieve. So for the purpose of this demonstration, I'll just sticky tape my two pieces together approximately how I want them to be. And then I drill straight down. I hope that's not too loud at the other end there.
No, the computer mutes it for us, so that's good.
Woohoo! Oh, and I've got a nice stuck bit of. If you have some lubricant on, I think I'm using Burr Life. A little bit of lubricant. Oh, it makes so much easier.
Big difference.
Oh, yes. So I've got my pieces drilled, and now I want to make that little countersunk shelf, almost like a little bevel inside each side. So get rid of my sticky tape. Okay, take the top piece, and I'll swap out my drill bit for my little ball burr. So the ball burr that I've chosen for this, so my drill bit was 1.1 mil. My ball burr is 1.4. So it's just a fraction bigger. That's the wrong side. So I'm just going to ever so slightly go in. I'm not trying to drill all the way through. I just have to create that little lip at the top. So yeah, and this is where I'm going to have to get close to my piece because it's so dark here. I'm going to have to get nice and close. So I'm just giving it a little, almost like a little camphor, just to. Now I don't know whether you're going to be able to see this clearly. But yeah, there's like a little shelf now, and it's only going down. I mean, this metal would be 1.2 mil thick. The little shelf is probably only going down 0.2 to 0.3 of a mil. So it's not very far. Okay, but it's enough to hold the piece once it's riveted well. So I'm going to take the other one. So I've turned this over so it's the back side or the underside of this part. Get rid of any burrs. And that one, yeah, you don't need much. So yeah, that's the underside. See if we can. Oh, it's so hard to see such small stuff.
Yeah, it's a bit hard to see, but we've definitely got the idea there, Catherine.
Yeah. Okay, so flip that one over so we get the right orientation. Put our two pieces on top. And the next thing we grab is our wire. So if you do have parallel pliers, popping your wire into your pliers through the center of them is a great way. Then the whole length of the wire is being held and is secure. So I find that kind of a much more stable way of holding wire. Now, you do want your ends to be flat or nice and sanded off. So one way that you can do that is by holding them in your pliers and taking your file and just filing off that end. Will you be able to see down here? Yep. So you can file that flat so that you've got a nice surface to work with. Otherwise, it's a bit hard to, if you've got a pointed bit, you can't quite accurately measure how much you've got to be able to fill the hole. So if you've got flat edges on both sides, you've got a bit more accurate measurement. Okay, that's pretty flat. We'll get rid of all the burrs on the edges so it'll go through the hole. And then we're feeding it through. So we take the top one, pop through the face, take the bottom one, and make sure that, of course, that the two canthers, the two shelves, are on the outside faces. Yep, they're good. And then get rid of our pliers. So we can get rid of our drilling block, don't need that anymore. And this is where we come into hammering. So we need to do our measuring, and this is where our pieces of little pieces of cardboard come in handy. So if you place one, it's a plain card folded in half, and then it's got little holes punched out of it with a little hole punch. So pop one on the back, one on the other end, and then you place it upright on your metal block, and you push down so that it's nice and flat on the block. This is where you use your flush cutters, and make sure that the flat part is against the your playing card. Push down and cut. Now the reason why those flush cutters are so fantastic is because it automatically gives you a nice flat surface to start with, and you don't have to then file away the point that's created by a normal pair of pliers. And this is where we start hammering. Now you can protect your work. So if, like aluminium, it is a very, very soft metal. So if you do not strike that wire exactly correctly, and you miss and you end up hitting around it, you're going to create a little dent. So you can protect your work with little pieces of masking tape. Or if you've got something like you've powder coated something, you don't want to chip off your powder coating. But you also might be going, well, I'm using the same metal, I'm going to be sanding it back anyway, I won't worry about this step because, I don't need to. So again, this is a design decision as to how you're going to look after your work while you are assembling. So I'm just taking little strips of masking tape and building up a little space, little protection around the piece. So I'll protect one side and I'll leave the other side unprotected, and you can see the difference. Okay, so I'm using my little favorite riveting hammer. It's got a flat face on one side and a rounded face on the other. For this one, because I'm wanting to fill that space, I actually start with the flat one to try and spread that out as quickly as possible, spread the wire out. So like last time where we go backwards, forwards from the top to the bottom, you do the same thing here so that you have even kind of even control, and you're filling that space equally. So, and it means then that your rivet should be the same size on both sides. So If you want to, you can do like I do and count sometimes, you know, where you kind of do 30 hits on one side and 30 on the other, but that's up to you. Just keep going backwards and forwards. So I've done the top bit. I flip over and I push the metal down so that the wire is exposed. Flip over, do the same. And what's happening is that the wire is beginning to spread and fill that hole. So push down. Now that I've kind of made it stretch out a little bit, what I'm going to try and do is really get in and make sure it's pushed right into those areas. Now, if I don't do this correctly, what will end up happening, and I'll do a little drawing so you can see this. Okay, so here's my piece of metal. And here's my rivet. If I have not kind of filled the hole adequately, what will end up happening is I'll end up with shadows or kind of little gaps. And so they end up looking like these little dark patches kind of where I have not filled in the hole properly. And so it looks like there's a gap, there's a hole in the rivet. So this is where you want to take like extra care and a bit of extra time to make sure you're getting all that metal into the groove. If you have taken out too much material when you've used the ball burr, and then you don't give yourself enough metal, then yeah, you haven't got enough metal in the wire to fill the hole. So this is one of the reasons why you don't want to take out too much with the ball burr, because that means you need more metal to fill the space. Let's keep going. Now, what I'm doing now is to make sure I fill up those gaps. I'm swapping over to the other end to try and really push that metal into all the corners. And back over. Backwards and forwards. And I don't know whether you can tell on the video, but certainly when you're hammering, you can tell when you hit the wire and when you hit the metal. So when you miss, you can hear it. There's a different tone to the hammering. Flip over. So this is where you do, take that little bit extra time, make sure you get that, metal, the wires deep into that, the little bevel as much as possible. Because you're actually filling in that hole, it won't have that kind of cup shape like the mushroom one. It should be sinking down into it. So you should have something that's kind of almost relatively flat, just a little kind of bump. If you use too much metal, then you've got to, at my phone?
No, that was my phone, Katherine. Sorry about that.
It's like, I'm sure my phone doesn't make that sound. Yeah, it should be kind of almost flat with just a tiny little ridge on it. But if you use too much metal, then you've got to sand away a lot more. So kind of getting that right amount of depth with your ball burr and the right amount of metal that's just going to fill that space is a good, yeah, that's good planning. Plan well, kind of that measure twice, cut once. So now that we've got, yeah, we've got that nice and flat, we're going to get rid of that little bump so that it's a completely flat surface. So I'm using just a 400 grade sandpaper here on a sanding stick, and I'm just giving it some flat strokes across. So yeah, we're beginning to kind of get rid of the little bump. Do the other side. And so there's one, with this type of method, you have to remember that you are going to be sanding this back. So you will be kind of marking your metal. But I actually quite like the, I like the effect that the sanding gives. It kind of makes the rivet more obvious with that kind of sanded finish. So if I do want to make, if I've done it in different colours and I do want to make it pop, I actually quite like the sanded finish. So depending on how much metal you've got on top, hopefully you would only need a little bit of sandpaper to get rid of it. But if you've used a bit too much, then you may have to get in there with a file to take the metal off. So what you should end up with is a perfectly round dot. If it's the same material, it should be invisible. It should disappear and not be visible. But if you've got something that's different metals, then yeah, you should have just a nice round, perfectly circular dot of the second material. Okay. Let's have a look. I have to get nice and close to it because I'm blind. That's looking pretty good. Now, again, I don't know whether it's so difficult to see. You might be able to see on this side. This is the side that I didn't protect. And so there's ever so slight, tiny little dent marks around the rivet. And so you can sand those away. But what, of course, you need to be careful of is that you don't sand down so much that you end up, oops, that will be there. So if I sand away this side, it's still got material holding that rivet in place. But if I sand down so far that I get rid of this camphor, of course your rivet can pop right out. So you have to be aware of how much you're sanding down so that you don't remove the very mechanism that's keeping the rivet in place. So be aware that if you're going to be sanding that surface back, yeah, just how much you're sanding it back, because you don't want to lose the the lip that is holding the piece in place. Right. I might give that a little bit more of a sand back. Where's my new edge on my sanding stick? It's pretty good. And I'm pleased to report there are no shadows. So that means that I've been able to fill that hole nice and effectively. Yeah.
Can it take a bit of practice to get the technique exactly right, Katherine?
Yeah, certainly the first few test runs that I ever did when I was first learning, I was a little bit more hit and miss. And so I wasn't quite making sure that I was angling the hammer so that it would actually spread the wire into all the edges, like get it right, right to the very edge of the little camphor. But over time, now that I know that, I take a little bit more time to hammer and just go that, an extra couple of minutes of just lightly hammering to make sure it's completely and utterly, filled in. So yeah, I hope you can.
Good tips, thank you.
Yeah. Where's the bit there? About there? Oh, getting the right angle. So yeah, there's a nice little pop of copper in the aluminium. This subtle, subtle little rivet. So you can use this as a feature. So instead of connecting two pieces of material, you might just do it through one, and this becomes, something like the eye of a fish or dots on a design, or on one occasion I used this for making like stars and doing star patterns through something. But I only needed one layer of material, but this was a nice, quick and easy way of having two different coloured metals and being able to create a pattern with these little flush rivets. So you don't necessarily, what it meant was that I didn't have to solder all those little pieces in place. I could just rivet them in place and create the pattern in a single sheet. However, as a joining mechanism for two or more pieces of material, that is quite efficient. And as you can see, like I can't move that now. That is very much riveted in place. It's not going to go anywhere.
Now, Katherine, speak of movement, got a couple of questions here. So Bliss has been busily taking notes, has asked, can you use rivets to create movement in the piece?
Oh, yes, you can. So that is then about, it's then about how much metal you give yourself and how much you then kind of round off. So this method is a little bit harder to get the rivets to have movement because you are trying to fill that space. But the classic rivet that we did last time, absolutely. Just by not hammering as much and giving yourself a little bit of extra material, then you can, kind of raise it up, but have enough of a gap so that there's still hanging movement. So definitely you can utilize rivets. I suppose in one sense, it's about knowing when to stop the hammering. So when I want to create movement in it, I will, hammer one side, hammer the other, hammer the top side, hammer the other, and then test and see whether there's enough movement in it, but also visually check that I've got enough lip to be able to still hold it in place.
Yeah.
I hope that answers the question.
Just creating the space. And as Orietta asked, do you need any lubricants? I assume you don't.
Oh, for the actual movement, not necessarily. It would depend on the material that you were using. The other thing with the movement, though, is that depending on the material, whatever is the weaker one will wear. So if you imagine that you had like a titanium rivet and you just had copper sheet metal, the sheet metal would slowly over time wear away with that material because it's softer than the titanium. So that one, you wouldn't need lubricant for the movement, but you've just got to be aware of what materials you're using so that you're not, admittedly though, in jewellery making, that would take a long time to wear away because most jewellery is not under that much weight. So something to consider, but it's not going to be a major issue. So something to be aware of.
Anyway, so perhaps that's a subject for a future presentation where we can show how you can do that.
Rivets, yes.
No worries. So thank you, everybody, for your input. And if there's any other questions out there, please fire away before we wrap up.
Oh yes, pass through the questions. If people do want to ask anything, please ask, and I will do my best to answer.
So Orietta sent us lots of love. So that's great. Thank you, Orietta. Fiona's asked, can you rivet through stone?
Ooh. Look, yes, you could. But it's having the equipment to be able to drill through the stone in the first place. If you have access to materials that can cut through stone, then absolutely. The other thing though with stone is you probably have to, this is something I haven't done. I'm just kind of thinking through some of the logistics.
Yep.
With stone, you would probably have to, or at least some of them, you would need to do with water, because you'd be like the heat generated off drilling could be problematic. The other thing with stone could be the dust. So again, the water would help with keeping that to a minimum. So again, I would say researching what stone you've got, how it can be drilled, and then being aware of what it is like to hammer it. I wouldn't try riveting with opal, for example, and probably not jade. Like a river pebble could probably work quite nicely. It would be about investigating the right equipment to be able to drill through the stone. And whether the stone can endure the repeated hammering. Even though you're not aiming for the stone itself, it's still going to be vibrated from you hammering the wire. Yeah.
No worries. So a little bit of homework for you to do there, Fiona, if you want to explore that a bit further.
Yeah, good question.
Thank you.
And I want to see everybody's designs now.
It's certainly got Katherine thinking there, so I'm sure she appreciated that. And everyone said very interesting. Jackie has said, yes, you can rivet stone drill underwater using a diamond drill bit.
There we go.
Orietta's asked, could I leave a card between the two metal layers to achieve a bit of distance movability? And then...
Oh, can you ask that again? We had some noise outside.
So to create that distance between the two pieces of metal, could you put a card in between there and do your bits and pieces? You probably have to rip it out and destroy your card.
Exactly.
But,
yes, you could absolutely potentially put some kind of brace or bracket or spacer in between, but you have to be able to remove it afterwards. So yeah, a little piece of paper just with a slit in it. So you'd slide it in, yeah, and then you could just pull that out. Yeah, that would work. Little piece of cardstock, or you could potentially use, like, if you wanted lots of distance and movement and things being able to kind of move on backwards and forwards, like putting another piece of metal in between where you have drilled out a hole, you've got a cut line in it so it can slide onto the wire. That could, yeah, that's a potential solution as well. There is also another solution, which we'll be showing in possibly 2 demos time, called spaced rivets. And this is where you can use tubing to put distance in between your 2 pieces of metal. So come back and you will see a version.
Excellent.
Different kind of a rivet. Yeah.
Yeah, Fiona she said, oh, thanks. She was more concerned about cracking the stone. So yeah, you'd have to do some exploration to see that.
Yeah. I mean,
the stone could be drilled.
This is where I'd be kind of going to some lapidary people and yeah, asking the question of, you know, what stone have I got? How can this be done? Yeah, if you've got a local lapidary club, those guys are awesome. They can help with answering the questions with stones, and possibly be able to utilise their equipment.
And Connie said, I wish I could talk to you myself. I have found some amazing stones and gems just by coincidence, and I've got no clues, laugh out loud. So Connie, Katherine's details are in the chat, in the Facebook comments there. So if you'd like to connect with her, I'm sure she'd only be too happy to answer any questions you may have.
Love to touch base with anybody. If you've got any questions that you think of later, yeah, or design issues that you'd like to chat through, more than happy to, yeah, have a conversation.
Excellent. Okay, well, we might call it a wrap there. Katherine, thank you so much for your expertise and displaying that again for us today.
My absolute pleasure. So yeah, if we do go by our plan, the next session that we'll do is tube riveting, and then our final session will be spaced riveting. So yes, 2 more sessions on rivets, and that will give you the full gamut of skills to be able to use with riveting, and be able to utilise that in your designs. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much, AJS, for hosting today's session. Really appreciate it.
That's great. Thanks for being here, Katherine, and thanks for being here, audience, now and in the future. Okay, see you, Katherine.
Thanks, Peter. Much appreciated. Bye.